everyone, it is Hunter Fireflower, and in today's video I will be doing a summary and review of Timothy Zahn's novel titled Thrawn. So in this video I will be having the Thrawn comic book series as kind of like the side panels. So without further ado, let's begin. Before I start, I just want to give a quick review of exactly where we are in the timeline. So this book takes place 4 to 10 years after the Empire was first formed, and so this takes place right after the Solo movie. Thrawn is the main focus of this novel, and this whole novel just tells us how he gets discovered in the Empire and how he makes his way from being this unknown alien to eventually becoming a Grand Admiral of the Imperial Navy. And as Thrawn is making his way through the Imperial Navy, it makes us wonder as a reader, is Thrawn actually loyal to the Empire, or is he loyal to the Chiss? In addition to Thrawn's story, we also have the story of Miss Price, who is the governor of Lothal that we see in Rebels. Her story actually starts to intertwine with Thrawn's story later in the novel, and her whole goal is trying to achieve political power in the Empire, because when we first meet her, she's not even interested in politics until the Empire wrongs her, and then she basically goes out to seek revenge. So we also get her story and how she becomes the governor of Lothal in this novel as well. Now I just want to give you guys a quick spoiler warning. I am going to basically give a full summary of the book, so if you don't actually want to read the book, you should continue watching, but if you are thinking about reading the Thrawn novel, I am going to be basically spoiling the entire novel for you. But if you are going to continue the video, I hope you enjoy. The novel starts off in this planet in the Outer Rim, and the Imperials have stumbled upon this abandoned camp, and in this camp there are these crates with this unknown language. And so the Imperials want to discover where this language came from, because they might be from the unknown regions of the galaxy. First Cadet Eli Vanto is sent on the scene to try to decipher where this language might have come from, and Eli is a first cadet in the Imperial Navy, and he actually wants to get into shipping and transport of materials once he graduates from the Imperial Navy, because that's what his family does in the Outer Rim. They own this business of transporting materials. As the Imperials are investigating the camp, there's these bombs going off and they're getting attacked, so the Imperials try to send out these stormtroopers to get rid of whoever is attacking them, but they all end up dead except for maybe 3 of them, and so the Imperials are just like, screw this, we're just gonna take this camp and bring it aboard the Steadfast, which is the Imperial cruiser in the sector, and then we're just gonna blow up this entire sector of the planet so that whoever was here would be gone. Once the camp is on the ship, they find out that the transport's actually carrying an extra person, who is Thrawn. Apparently Thrawn took out one of the stormtroopers, put on his armor, and then just pretended to be a stormtrooper, and so they discover him, and Thrawn is just like, I was exiled by the Chiss in the unknown regions, and I'm actually trying to get back to my planet because they're going to be attacked and I need to help them. While this is going on, we get this sense in the novel that Thrawn exerts this type of confidence in himself. Whenever he talks, he's very posed and full of himself, but he's not very cocky. In addition, he can speak some basic, but most of the language that he understands is Saibisti, so he is actually trying to converse with Eli, who also speaks Saibisti, and they're trying to communicate back and forth, and Eli just acts as this translator. Another interesting thing is that the Chiss actually are not really in the galaxy at this time. Everyone that sees a Chiss, they're like, who is that? You must be a Pandoran, but the Chiss are kind of these legendary things of myths that no one actually has ever seen in the known galaxy. The Imperials then decide to bring Thrawn before Chancellor Palpatine because they believe that Thrawn might have some key to understanding the unknown regions. No one really knows what's in the unknown regions, and they believe there might be a threat to the Empire further out there that they don't know yet. And Eli is assigned to be Thrawn's translator, since Thrawn doesn't actually really speak very good basic. This really upsets Eli because Eli was actually going to graduate and he wanted to get into this whole shipping, transportation materials thing, but he goes along with it anyways, and he just kind of reassures himself that, this is not going to be a permanent position. So they travel to Coruscant, and as they're going to Coruscant, Eli is just like, ugh, I hate Coruscant. All of these core worlds think they're better than the Outer Rim and all these people, because the core world people kind of treat the Outer Rim and Mid-Rim people as these kind of like second-class citizens. So they go to Coruscant and they meet before Palpatine, and Palpatine is just like, this is kind of interesting. I've never, really seen a Chiss before. What could you offer to the Empire? And Thrawn offers Palpatine information regarding the unknown regions and what's beyond there and how to defend against them. if the Empire will protect the Chiss if the Chiss were ever to be attacked. Palpatine then asks Thrawn, how do I know that you're going to keep your word? You just kind of showed up out of nowhere, and you're saying that you'll give me this information as long as we protect the Chiss. Like, how do I know you're not going to backstab us in the end and join the Chiss? And Thrawn just responds of, I know Anakin Skywalker, and he will basically vouch for me. Palpatine is intrigued by this, and so Thrawn and Eli are then sent to the Imperial Academy on Coruscant to finish up their training, to kind of give Thrawn a debriefing of Imperial protocol so that he can actually make his way into the Imperial Navy. And the reasoning for him being sent to the Imperial Academy is because they're intrigued because he seems to be this tactician. He was able to outmaneuver the Imperials on this base of operation on this unknown planet, and he was able to sneak aboard one of the Imperial cruisers. So Palpatine wants to try and get him into the Imperial Navy to serve the Empire because he seems to be a tactician. Thrawn and Eli then go to the Imperial Academy, and they meet up with Commander Dean Lark, who is in charge of the entire Imperial Academy on Coruscant. So they meet up with him, and Dean Lark gives Thrawn this lieutenant plaque. And Eli's like, ooh, this is not going to be good because he's not an actual lieutenant. Dean Lark is trying to test Thrawn. Dean Lark knows that if Thrawn is walking around with a lieutenant plaque, people are going to either think that he is one, like a teacher's pet that kind of just became friends of Dean Lark, and that's how he got his plaque. Or two, he failed Imperial training to begin with, and so he's going back to the Academy on Coruscant to retrain himself because he's a failure. While they are talking and going over protocols of what they're going to do, Dean Lark keeps having these anti-alien sentiments going on, and whenever he talks to Eli, he talks very slow. He thinks Eli's dumb because he's from the Outer Rim, and this just kind of reiterates what I said earlier about how these core world people believe that aliens and Outer Rim people are these uneducated individuals and that they're seen as secondary citizens to the Empire. So Thrawn and Eli then leave and they go to their next assignment. Meanwhile, the story takes a turn and we go to Lothal. We see Price running away from the aide of the governor of Lothal, and the governor's aide is trying to convince her to sell her family's mine to the governor because they're going to be getting attacked by all of these corporations coming to Lothal. He goes on to say, we know that you found dunium, which is this really rare metal, and we know that these corporations are going to come to Lothal and they're going to try and take over your mine and bully you. But if you sell your mine to the governor, we will be able to protect you and your family. Price is like, no, get out of here. And so then she returns home and she finds out that her mother was actually imprisoned by the governor for embezzlement. Price is outraged, so then she goes to Senator Reckling, who is the senator of Lothal, and she basically says, my mother's innocent, here's the proof. She has all these recordings and all this data to basically prove that her mother's innocent. And Reckling, the senator, is just like, this is not going to help at all because you're dealing with Imperial politics. The only way that you're going to actually set your mother free is if you sell me your mine and I can give you some position in the Empire at Coruscant, maybe working for me in an office or something, and your parents will be taken care of and I'll send them to this other mine to manage it. And Price is like, God, I can't do anything to help my mother, but this seems like the better deal because she always wanted to get off Coruscant, and this was kind of like the final straw with the Imperials taking over. So she does take up Reckling on this offer and she goes to Coruscant to work for him at an office, but deep down inside she's going to seek revenge against the governor as well as Reckling because the Empire basically tied her hands behind her back and she couldn't do anything, and her mother was just going to go to prison if she didn't sell the mine. Time has passed and we go over to Thrawn, and while Thrawn is at this academy, he always hides his lieutenant plaque. He doesn't want anyone else seeing the lieutenant plaque, so he hides it away in one of his jackets. And as he's going through his training, he keeps getting bullied by all these cadets. They're always making fun of him for being an alien. They call him stupid and slow or whatever. One day, Thrawn and Eli are invited to gamble on some card games in one of these research labs at the academy with these cadets who have been picking on Thrawn. Thrawn agrees to go to this whole gambling session, and Eli just says, what are you doing? You're walking into a trap. They're going to get you in trouble if you do this. And Thrawn's just like, watch and learn, kid. And eventually, while they're playing cards, Thrawn pulls out his lieutenant plaque that he was hiding in his pocket and he puts it on, and after he puts it on, literally one of the teachers of the academy walks into this lab and it's like, hey, you guys shouldn't be here, you guys are gambling, what's going on here? And Thrawn just turns around with his lieutenant plaque, and the teacher assistant guy is just like, oh, I'm sorry, Lieutenant, I didn't know what was going on, go about your day. And the other cadets that tried to get Thrawn in trouble are just kind of dumbstruck. They didn't know that he had this lieutenant plaque, and they're like, what? We were supposed to get this kid out of the Imperial Academy with this gambling thing, but it didn't work, obviously. And as they're going back to their barracks, they get attacked. Thrawn is able to take them all on. He is just wiping the floor of them, and then eventually the attackers leave. In response to this, Eli and Thrawn then go back to the commander, Dean Lark, and they basically tell him what's happening, and they're like, I think this kid is behind it, this head bully that's been bullying Thrawn. And Dean Lark's just like, I can't really touch the kid because his parents are like these huge funders for the Imperial Navy on Coruscant, and he's basically just kind of like this rich kid, and he's like, yeah, I can't really do anything about that guy, but I can kind of send his friends away. So it just kind of shows us the corruption of what's going on in the Imperial Navy. If you have enough money and influence, you can't get in trouble. After their talk with Dean Lark, Eli and Thrawn then walk off, and Eli's kind of like, I'm going to kind of stick with Thrawn, and he suggests to Thrawn that he should take his lieutenant plaque and make it into some type of comm device, so that if he ever needs help or backup, Eli could be there, or whoever else could be there, and it might be a good idea to kind of keep that as like a little like secret spy device thing. And as they're going back, Thrawn and Eli have this like heart-to-heart type of thing, and Thrawn actually tells Eli why he was exiled to begin with. Apparently, these pirates were attacking this non-Chiss world, so in response, Thrawn attacked the pirates to try and get them out of the sector, and the Chiss were like, why did you attack them, They weren't going to attack us, and Thrawn is just like, yeah, they were going to be eyeing us next, so he tried to get rid of the pirates before they could actually attack the Chiss. And so in response, the Chiss kind of just exiled Thrawn and threw him on this planet because he was not actually listening to orders. Time continues on Coruscant, and it's graduation time. Eli and Thrawn have made it through the whole academy training, and they are both going to be assigned to the Blood Crow, which is actually the ship going into the Outer Rim. Thrawn is assigned to be the second weapon officer aboard the ship. Meanwhile, Eli is actually assigned to be Thrawn's aide. Eli is completely upset with this. He was like, I didn't want to become your aide, I didn't want to be in your shadow. You actually are the one that asked for this. And Thrawn's like, no, I didn't. They just assigned you to me for no reason. And so Thrawn tries to assure him, and Eli is just so distraught. His entire career, his entire life, he wanted to walk into his family's footsteps of becoming this like shipping manager thing on, doing transporting materials and stuff. But since Eli is already assigned to this, he just follows the orders and he goes off with Thrawn. Meanwhile, Price is on Coruscant. She loves Coruscant. Lothal is kind of like this backwater farming type of community with mines and stuff like that. So it's very, very different from Coruscant. So she has adjusted to Coruscant life, and she wants to get more power. She wants to become like this manager at her job. She wants to become this upper class citizen. So she works very, very, very hard to try and get promoted so that she could actually make her way up the Empire's ladder of, society. Time continues on, and Thrawn has been on the Blood Crow with Eli for a very, very long time, and they actually have a new captain aboard the ship. Captain Philia Rossi is the new captain aboard the ship, and she actually worked with transporting Dunium throughout the Empire. Her whole job was to make sure that the Dunium shipments were actually protected from these pirates, since Dunium is in high demand right now. So she is patrolling the ship, and she goes through Thrawn's stuff. Apparently Thrawn has this bay full of buzz droids and Clone Wars weapons, and she's just like, what is this junk here? And Thrawn's like, I'm studying the Clone Wars, I've never seen this type of technology before, of the Chiss. And then Captain Rossi is like, I'm just going to throw this stuff away. This is completely junk. And Thrawn's like, don't do that. Buzz droids are actually very, very expensive because apparently they have this Dunium core. And she's like, yeah, you're right. And so she kind of lets Thrawn keep his toys as long as he follows her orders and just keeps the whole ship tidy. Time continues on the Blood Crow, and eventually the ship actually receives a distress signal from this transport vehicle that is transporting Tabani gas, which is this very expensive gas in the Empire. So in response to this distress signal, Thrawn, Eli, and a bunch of these other Imperial engineers are being sent to investigate the ship. Once on the ship, they notice that there's nobody there, it's completely empty, and then all of a sudden they're held at blaster point by this guy named Signy. Signy tells them that the ship was actually raided by these pirates and how the pirates took all of his men away and how he was able to hide in this locker so they weren't able to capture him, but they're going to be coming back to get the gas because apparently this gas is static locked, which kind of just makes it like fused into the side of the ship. Signy then tells Thrawn and the Imperials that the hyperdrive is not working and that he believes the pirates are going to go get some tools to fix the hyperdrive, come back, and then they'll fix the hyperdrive and then they'll sail off with the ship and as well as the gas. Thrawn then sends one of the Imperial engineers that was sent to him on his team to go fix the hyperdrive because if the hyperdrive's fixed, the ship can just go into hyperspace and get out of here and the pirates won't have the gas. While this engineer is working, he tells Thrawn that there's actually a reactor leak in the ship, which is a big deal, and Thrawn thinks this is very suspicious. If you were going to tell the Imperials what was wrong with your ship, you would mention that the reactor was leaking because that's a major part of the ship. So he thinks something else is afoot. Thrawn then calms Rossi, who is the captain of the Blood Crow, and he's asking for assistance. He's like, something is wrong here. Something's not quite right. These pirates are going to be coming back. And Rossi's just like, you're on your own. We are going to assist this Imperial outpost that is getting attacked. And the reasoning for this is because since Thrawn is this alien and this upcoming figure, a lot of generals and captains don't want to really help him because they see him as a threat to their own reputation, and possibly maybe he will take their position since he is such a good tactician and a good soldier. So the Blood Crow is not in the system anymore, and Thrawn just orders his engineers to fix the reactor in the hyperdrive, and so that they can maybe go to an Imperial outpost and they can get dropped off. After the reactor and hyperdrive is fixed though, Signy pulls out his blaster on the Imperials, and a bunch of pirates come storming out of all these nooks and crannies and holes in the ship, and they get captured. While Thrawn and his men are captured, the pirates dock their own frigate ship to the Tabani gas ship, and they're going to be transporting the materials from one ship to the other ship. Thrawn and his whole team are kind of in this cell, and Thrawn is just listening to one of the pirate leaders talk to Sinji, and they're talking about dropping off the Imperials on this planet, but while they're talking, they're using these kind of non-normal words, they're kind of using this slang language, and Thrawn is thinking about this. He is noting all of the slang terms that they're using because he is later going to use these words to figure out where these pirates came from. The pirates decide that they are going to take all of the gas, and then they're just going to drop the Imperials off on this planet, and then they're going to escape. While this is going on, Thrawn takes out his lieutenant plaque. Thrawn then touches some buttons on his lieutenant plaque, which then activates these buzz droids that he stored on this ship because he figured that they would need these buzz droids later. And these buzz droids then take out these drills and they start to make their way to the holding cell, and they begin to open up the holding cell, and Thrawn and his team are able to escape and subdue some of the pirates. However, Thrawn was unable to save the Tabani gas because the pirates just drove off with the Imperial ship with all of the gas. Meanwhile, Thrawn and his team were left on the pirate frigate with nothing but just basically an empty cell, but at least they were alive. In Thrawn's eyes, this is a defeat. He maybe got 2 or 3 of the pirates that were watching him as a guard, and he didn't get the Tabani gas. So he sets off on this mission of trying to recover this Tabani gas because he is the type of individual where if he loses, he will try his best to try and win in the end. Thrawn and his team returns to the Blood Crow, and Thrawn gets interrogated by Captain Rossi. Rossi's just like, you lost the gas on purpose, and she suspends them from the military. She's going to send them off on this planet. They're just going to stay at this base and try to recover their debts basically, because she thinks Thrawn and Eli are just going to basically mess up again at another mission. Eli is completely angry with this. He's like, you did this on purpose, Thrawn. You knew exactly what you were doing, and you just wanted to get us suspended from the military so that we will not have a military career. And Thrawn's just like, don't worry about it, Eli. I will figure this out, and we will get the gas back. While they are suspended on this Imperial outpost, Thrawn is able to convince the commander of this Imperial outpost to let him interrogate the pirate prisoners they acquired while they were escaping. So while Thrawn is interrogating, he's trying to get an idea of where these pirates are from. If he knows what planet or what sector they're from, he might be able to find their outposts and maybe recover some of the Tabani gas. So while he's interrogating, he's trying to talk to them about how Tarkin is going to get involved because he knows that you are the pirates that are involved with Queen Kawantha, I believe is her name. Queen Kawantha is this really old pirate queen, and so he is trying to just get under their skin and see what their reactions are to certain things he says. Thrawn then offers them, if you tell me some information, maybe the name of your ship, we will set you free. And so they give him the name of the ship, and while the pirates are conversing among each other, they're talking in Saibisti. And Thrawn does know Saibisti, so Thrawn knows exactly what's going on. The pirates are talking back and forth how they're going to try and give him misinformation, and then they're going to meet up at this one location, and then they'll go meet up with the crew and they'll go off on their way. But this does not fool Thrawn at all, since he actually knows what they're saying. So it's kind of funny how, like, these Outer Rim people that speak these very obscure languages will try to assume that you don't know what they're talking about at all, but in reality, Thrawn is just sitting there, like, you know, acting like he doesn't know what they're saying, even though he does. In addition, while they're talking, the pirates are using, like I said before, these slang terms, and Thrawn is able to pinpoint exactly what planet and sector that they are going to be in based off of these slang terms, just because the locals in that area use that type of terminology. After the pirates give Thrawn the information, the pirates are then set off and they're freed, and Eli and the other Imperials are like, why did you do that? And Thrawn's like, don't worry, I know exactly where they're going, and we will capture them again later. The next scene cuts over to Coruscant, and this is in the future. We have Price talking to one of her friends, Juhar, and they're talking about how well Price is doing with Renkling. She's going up the ladder on Coruscant, and she's actually able to get Juhar and her friend Driller into some of these prestigious parties of the Empire. I mean, Empire Day is coming up, which is kind of like the 4th of July of the Empire. This is like when the Empire was founded. So there's all these parties going on, and Price is going to be able to get Juhar and Driller into some exclusive parties where only the prestigious and snobby of the core world's people go to. There's this big ball going on, and Price then sees Renkling talking to a few people who happens to be Eli, Thrawn, Yularen, who is this like big commander in the Imperial Navy. Yularen is like the guiding figure of Thrawn. So Price goes over to talk to Renkling, and she overhears the conversation they're having of how Thrawn was able to outmaneuver these pirates and he was able to save this Tabani gas, but Sinji, the head of the pirates, was able to escape, but they were able to capture all the other pirates. And so this is kind of showing us that Thrawn won in the end. He was able to get the gas and most of the pirates, but he still has these harboring feelings of regret because he wasn't able to get the Pirate King, Sinji. So he's going to kind of go on this vendetta of trying to get him later on in the novel. In addition, we learn that the Tabani gas was actually going to be sent to this person called Nightswan. And Nightswan is this individual who is starting these resurgent rebel groups in the Outer Rim. And so the Imperials are going to try and to investigate Nightswan to see who he is and how they can bring him to justice. After this whole conversation, Price then talks to Renkling, and Renkling gives Price a data pad, and he goes, I need you to deliver this to Moff Gahadi, I believe is his name. So Price goes off to Gadi's apartment, which is this super luxurious apartment in Core Square, which is kind of like the upper class of Coruscant. There's all these beautiful statues. Everything is like prestigious and just elegant. And so she hands him the data card, and Gadi pretends to download it into like his computer thing, and he hands it back to her, but she notices that the card is not the same. She's like, like I gave him one card, but he gave me another card that's supposed to look exactly the same. And Moff Gadi notices that she knows that it's not the same card, so he takes out this can of very potent spice and like shoves it all in her face, so she gets basically pepper sprayed. And he's like, you weren't supposed to know that this was a different card because I know Renkling is trying to set me up for some political scheme. And he's like, now that you know what's going on, you have to listen to me or I'm going to call the police on you and you will be arrested. This just shows that the Empire has like these dealings going on, and these people get drawn into these dealings that actually have no part in it. Like Price literally had no idea what was going on between Renkling and Gadi, but somehow she is going to be drawn into this conflict just because she was just working for Renkling. And so Price then agrees to do whatever he says, and Gadi gives her another data card, and he's like, I want you to take this to Renkling, upload it to his computer, and I will take care of the rest. She does this, and the following day, Renkling's office gets raided by all of these police. Everyone is laid off from work because Renkling is getting arrested, because apparently this data card had information regarding financial discrepancies, that he was basically siphoning off like public funds to his own account or something like that. Time continues on, and we are back to Thrawn on Coruscant. Thrawn is about to be court-martialed because he wasn't able to capture Sinji. The court-martial order doesn't go through, and Thrawn actually gets promoted to the first captain officer of the Thunder Wasp. Thrawn keeps getting court-martialed, and you might be wondering, like, how is Thrawn getting through all these issues just fine? And the reasoning for this is because Palpatine is involved. Palpatine wants to see Thrawn succeed, so Palpatine is actually the one behind stopping a lot of these court-martials and these dismissals. You have all of these Imperials trying to dismiss him from the Imperial Navy, but Palpatine comes in and is like, oh, you're going to court-martial Thrawn? Cancel that. You're going to promote him instead. So Palpatine is the one behind all of this, trying to get him up in the ranks fast. After the whole court-martial session is over, Thrawn goes off and they're going to go to the Thunder Wasp. While Eli is approached by this woman that works for Gaudi. And she offers him a position for Moff Gideon. She tries to convince him that, Thrawn is going to be thrown in the dirt by all of these big Imperial Moffs, and that he is actually not going to succeed in the end, and how Thrawn is carrying Eli down, and how he can actually grow and become this big name in the Imperial Navy if he stopped working for Thrawn. And Eli, he's like, yeah, you're kind of right. But in the end, he declines the offer. And the woman's like, you will regret this in the end. So Thrawn, even though he's not really in power, he's now a first captain of this ship. He's not a Moff or in charge of a ship at all. But there's these big names that want to see him fail because they see him rise in the power so fast. And since he's friends with Palpatine, no one wants to see him succeed. Time continues on the Thunder Wasp. Everything is going fine and dandy. However, one thing that is intriguing Thrawn is, he's buying all of these Clone Wars materials, but one thing that he has noticed is that the price of Dunium continues to rise. He's looking at the price of Dunium and he's noticing that these buzz droids are increasing in price, and so he's assuming that something is afoot. Someone is buying all this Dunium for some reason, but he doesn't know quite sure why yet. Thrawn and Eli are then assigned to investigate this issue that's going on this planet because apparently there is this planet that is shipping out Urdanium, I believe is how you pronounce the metal. And they notice that this one planet has their Urdanium exports not actually being exported at all, but instead there's mollusks being exported. And so Thrawn and Eli are sent to this planet to investigate why there is no metal coming from this planet. So Thrawn and Eli are on this planet and they're investigating. They're going to these mollusks farms and they're going to the mines and they're investigating. There's all these mollusks being exported, but there's no Urdanium being exported from this planet, even though this planet is the main producer of Urdanium in the sector. And so Thrawn goes off to the farms of the mollusks and he notices one thing. He notices that there's these giant fish hanging out by the docks. He then goes to some of the shipments that are supposed to be exported off the planet and he starts opening up the mollusks. And once he starts opening up the mollusks, he then sees that the Urdanium is actually being put into the mollusks instead of the meat, and the meat was just apparently being tossed into the water, and that's why all the fish were congregating by the docks. Thrawn then interrogates all of the mollusk workers, and the mollusk workers just tell him, Nightswan and the Umbrians told us this trick at how we can try to smuggle off metals and kind of work around the Empire, because the Empire basically puts these giant tariffs and stuff like that on metals whenever you export them, and this was actually a better way to make money because you could sell them to third-party sellers on the black market. And so Thrawn then thinks that Nightswan is behind this whole thing, and Nightswan is not just this one instance of Tabani gas. Nightswan is kind of this rebel, resurgent type of group that is working in the entire galaxy to try to bring down the Empire. So he thinks that this Nightswan character is trying to take all of the metals from the Empire, but he's not quite sure what these metals are being used for in the Empire, but it must be something important. The Thunder Wasp then gets sent to Umbara because apparently the Umbarian people are having this revolt. They're stashing all of these weapons and they're revolting against the Empire, and so the Thunder Wasp is going there to basically intimidate the people to try to have them lay their arms down and submit to the Empire. One of the important admirals that's basically in charge of controlling the Umbran people is Admiral Gendley. He is in charge of the ship the Foremost, and the captain of the Thunder Wasp, Kino, is basically acting as a support to Gendling so that they can try and bring down these resurgent groups. While Gendling is telling the people of Umbara to lay down their weapons, a massive force of Vulture droids comes out from behind this moon of Umbara, and then all these Vulture droids then attack the Imperials. The Imperials are getting decimated. Kino, the captain of the Thunder Wasp, has no real experience in combat and maneuvering, and so Thrawn basically takes the lead and then orders all the people on the ship to do exactly what he says. He's like, fire here, do this, do this, do that, do this. And he notices one thing while these Vulture droids are attacking. They're kind of attacking as they have this pre-sequenced programmed mentality, and he believes that there's somebody on Umbara that is actually controlling the droids, and he notices that when the droids get out of a certain range of the planet, they start to lose function. They don't actually maneuver, I would say, to precise accuracies. Thrawn then talks to Gendling, and he's like, hey, there's this place on the planet that's controlling the Vulture droids. We need to attack this exact location or this sector so that maybe the Vulture droids will just stop working altogether because there's no signal coming from the planet. Gendling totally ignores this, and his ship is about to go down, but Thrawn is able to actually outmaneuver the Vulture droids, and in the end, the Imperials win, but there's massive casualties. After this whole battle, Gendling, Kino, and Thrawn meet up, and Gendling is not having any of it with Thrawn. He's like, you tried to basically take over this battle, but you can't because I'm the one in charge. You are going to be court-martialed. And Kino's just like, hey, don't mess with Thrawn. If you're going to court-martial anyone, it should be me. I should retire from the military because I didn't do my job properly in the battle. And so Kino takes the fall for Thrawn. Kino knows that he's not the best captain in the Imperial Navy, and he knows that Thrawn is going to be this shining star in the Empire, so that is the reason why he takes the fall for him. After this whole meeting, Thrawn meets up with Eli, and they talk. They always talk together because Thrawn just kind of throws ideas against Eli, and Eli throws them back. And they both conclude that Nightswan must have had some role in this battle because the Maulist people mentioned Nightswan and Umbara, and then you have all these Vulture droids. So they definitely believe Nightswan was trying to somehow manipulate this conflict, and Thrawn comes to the conclusion that maybe Nightswan wanted the Imperials to control Umbara instead of these resurgent rebels because it's easier to smuggle metals off of the planet if you have Imperials instead of locals, because locals actually care about the profits and everything. Meanwhile, the Empire is so vast and big that if it loses a little bit of profit, it won't really notice it that much. Time continues on in the Empire, and we go over back to Price on Coruscant. Price is now working for Driller, who is Juhara's friend, and they work in kind of like this advocacy group where they basically monitor metals being transported on different planets to basically try to make sure that people aren't getting ripped off by the Empire. After hard days of work at the office, Price then returns back to her apartment, and she's going down an elevator on Coruscant. As she's going down this elevator, it totally starts to break, and she gets rocketed down to the really, really lower levels of Coruscant. And the lower levels of Coruscant are these kind of shady, ghetto-y type areas. And as she's trying to make her way to another elevator that works, she gets mugged. And while she's getting mugged, these guys are trying to take advantage of her, but Juhara, her friend, comes out of nowhere with this guy named Odalus, and they take them on. Juhara is actually this dojo trainer. She trains people in self-defense, and particularly she trains bodyguards of senators. So she's able to take on all these guys of Odalus, and when Price looks at Odalus, she notices him as being this handsome, strapping young man who is working to be a bodyguard for some top Imperials. Juhara then suggests to Price, you should come to the dojo sometime. You should come train with us because self-defense is really important, and we can actually help you out so you don't have to deal with this type of nonsense later on. And Price agrees, but mainly because she wants to see more of Odalus than anything else. We then go over to Thrawn speaking to Yularen. Yularen, like I said earlier, he was at that big party on Coruscant on Empire Day, and he is one of these high-ranking people. So Yularen and Thrawn are going over the Nightswan reports. Their whole job and mission is to take down Nightswan, since Nightswan is apparently this big threat into the Empire. And as they're going through these reports, they notice that there was an assassination attempt on a senator, and this assassination attempt was actually by a bodyguard who actually trained on one of these martial arts schools on Coruscant. So they believe that maybe one of these martial arts dojos might be training people to try to assassinate these high-ranking Imperials. So Thrawn and Yularen are going to investigate to see if Nightswan has some role in this. But Yularen and Thrawn are traveling to all the different dojos that train these senator bodyguards, and they end up at Price's dojo, and Price is actually training there with Juhar and Odalus, and Thrawn recognizes Price. He's like, yeah, I kind of remember you from that one party a long time ago, and Price remembers Thrawn, and they're having a conversation of work. Thrawn then asks Price where she works, and she's like, oh, I work for this company called Higher Skies. We work with metal groups, and we try to make sure that everyone has fair trade in the Empire, and Thrawn remembers this. You have these dojos that are training guards that are trying to kill senators, and then you have Nightswan who is dealing with these metals all throughout the Empire and trying to steal them. So he thinks that Higher Skies is somehow associated with Nightswan. Time continues on Coruscant. Price and Odalus' relationship starts to bloom, and it's kind of getting a little romantic. And one day, Odalus invites her to a party at this house. So Price goes to the house and she notices that there's no party there. Instead, there is Autolus of Moff Guidy. And Guidy is like, you are not done serving me. I know that Higher Skies is trying to bring me down by trying to steal information about my mining operations throughout the galaxy. And I know that Higher Skies and the people that you're working for are actually working for Moff Tarkin. Price is just very confused. She has no idea what's actually going on. Guy then tells her to basically, you will listen to me or I'll have you imprisoned for that spice thing again. And Price is just like, yeah, sure, I'll do whatever you want. And so Gotti sends Price off to go to Higher Skies to collect all the information that she has regarding the sales of metal and the mines, and as well as any information regarding Moff Tarkin, who is Gotti's rival. And so Gotti wants to bring Tarkin down to basically take his spot. While Price is gathering this information, she thinks of a way to kind of blackmail Gotti. He's kind of just using her and she is tired of being used. So she calls up Thrawn and she's like, listen, we need to have a meeting. I have some information that you will find interesting. And so they meet up at this diner and Thrawn's like, what do you have for me? And she hands over this data card that basically just had the information saying that Gotti actually has this secret private mine and he is selling metal to the Empire through a third party. He's basically pretending to be a third seller of metals, when in reality, whenever you own a mine in the Empire, basically the Empire takes its cut and you get a little bit of the fraction of the money as well, but he's trying to get as much money he can from this mine. And so she gives Thrawn this information regarding this and basically says, I know you want to bring down Moff Guidy at some point. You might find this interesting because Tarkin is involved with this as well. And so you might be able to increase your military career if you try to bring him down. And she basically says, you'll get him off my back and you'll get credit for this as well because I know senators and I know people on Coruscant and I can try to basically help you out because you have all these people on you that are trying to bring you down. Thrawn agrees that, he will give this information to Yularen and the higher Imperial Navy people when he sees the opportunity. He doesn't want to do it right now. He's basically going to hold into this data card until he needs it the most, and eventually he'll bring down Moff Guidy. Time continues on, and Thrawn is then sent off to settle this clan dispute between these human colony clans on this one planet versus clan Saifri, I believe that's how you pronounce that. And one thing that is interesting is that the human mining logs show that there was these new veins of metal discovered on the planet, but for some reason the metal is not really getting exported, but instead there are more mollusks and other stuff being exported. So once again, Thrawn believes that this is probably Nightswan's doing. Thrawn first meets up with the humans and he basically interrogates them and it's like, what's going on? Why are you guys fighting over this mine? And the humans just say, the Saifri people have been attacking us, and in response they've just been attacking back. And while this whole conversation is going on, Thrawn is noticing that there's certain people that are telling their stories that seem to be lying. They're not telling the full truth, and he believes that there's something else afoot on the planet. Thrawn then meets up with the Saifri people, and the Saifri are just like, these humans are lying. They're the ones that are attacking us, and they pull out this data of all the different places that they've been attacking, and it's kind of been in the same locations on these farms. And Thrawn then travels to all of the areas that these humans have been attacking, and he looks at the crops. He notices that the exact locations of where these humans are attacking, the crops are much smaller in size compared to the other areas of the farm, and he believes that there might be some type of metal poisoning going on that's making these crops much smaller versus the other crops that are much healthier and bigger in size. Thrawn then sets up some Imperial defenses around these pinpoints, and he's going to try and capture these humans to see what they're actually doing at night. As the day turns into night, all of these humans come out with these speeders and they're going to these areas exactly where these crops are tainted with this metal poisoning, and they're collecting the soil. And while this is going on, the Imperials are just kind of watching. They're going back and forth watching them, and Thrawn goes through a bunch of information regarding the council members. He notices that one of the council members, their brother actually had this prestigious degree in kind of this organic chemistry, and he was actually in prison for spice trading and spice manufacturing. The Imperials then attack these humans while they're trying to gather the soil, and they're able to capture them and take a few of them out, and they interrogate them. The humans then tell them that Nightswan was actually the one in charge of this operation, and Nightswan told them exactly how to make this spice and how to try to export all of these metals and everything off the planet to try and make more money for the human colonies. Thrawn believes that Nightswan and other humans are going to try to continue this manufacturing of spice, so he orders this TIE fighter to completely destroy everywhere where this metal soil thing is, because apparently when you make spice, you need to have this metal in the soil and then you manufacture it to make spice somehow. So he's going to destroy all of the crops where this metal is located. Once the Imperials hear of Thrawn's decision to completely wipe out the crops, he is then summoned back to Coruscant, where he is going to be court-martialed again for basically destroying a bunch of crops on some planets because the locals are very upset. Time passes, and Price is collecting information regarding Moff Tarkin and Gandhi with all of this whole mining thing going on. But instead of taking the information to Gandhi, she brings it to Tarkin himself. Price hands over this datapad to Tarkin and says, the company I work for, Higher Skies, are actually rebels, and they're trying to basically siphon metals away from the Empire because for whatever reason they don't want you guys to have dunium and all of these metals. And in addition, Gandhi is trying to blackmail you at the same time, so here's some information regarding him that you can take him down with. She also did a bunch of research regarding Lothal, her home planet. One thing that she noticed while doing her research is that the people of Lothal that are owning these mines actually aren't paying taxes fully, and all of these mines are just trying to siphon money to their own pockets, and so she puts a bunch of information regarding those mines in there as well, and then she asks to be the governor of Lothal for all this information because she basically gave Tarkin Gandhi on a plate. In addition, she asked for Thrawn and Eli to be promoted because she knows that in the end they will be allies to her if she helps them. Tarkin agrees to this. He's like, I'll make you governor of Lothal. Price leaves, and she actually goes back to the dojo to meet her friend Juhari and Driller at the dojo. They actually are arrested by Imperials, and they are sent off to prison. And apparently, we also learn that Juhari and Driller have been manipulating senators to give them information so that they could aid Nightswan. After the arrest, Tarkin holds this giant ceremony and Thrawn is promoted to Commodore. Meanwhile, Eli is promoted to Lieutenant Commander. Thrawn gets ordered to investigate this transport that was raided, and nobody tells him what is actually on the transport. It's like this secret information that no one knows about except for Palpatine. Thrawn then arrives at the transport, and they're trying to investigate, what happened. Everyone is dead at the scene. There's massacre, there's blood everywhere, and they notice that in one of the transport bays, there were these giant beds. And Thrawn is like, they weren't transporting metals, they were transporting Wookiees. While they're investigating the ship, they notice that there's this big symbol on the ship. There's like this blood and there was like this handmade painting on the ship. Thrawn looks at the symbol and he believes that this symbol is kind of like a revenge symbol, and he thinks that the Wookiees escaped the ship and they're going to attack an Imperial base where the rest of the Wookiee slaves are being held. Thrawn then contacts one of the closest outposts that's probably where the Wookiees are being transported, and he gets a call back basically saying, hey, we're being attacked. Chimera goes there and destroys all of these Wookiee rebels, and they capture all of the rebels, and they find out that Nightswan was actually behind this Wookiee resurgent, and these Wookiees were apparently being sent off to do some Imperial project that we will discover what is later. Time continues on, and Price is now the full governor of Lothal, and Rankling is still the center of Lothal. Even though Gandhi tried to implant this information of embezzlement on him and trying to basically siphon funds to his own private accounts, it didn't work, and Rankling is still the center of Lothal, and Price wants to bring him down once more. In addition, Lothal is trying to fight with these other planets in the sector to have this giant Imperial Navy base thing built on the planet. Since Price really wants this shipyard on Lothal because Lothal is trying to compete with all of these planets for more money and having more Imperial funding, she tells Rankling, she's like, I need you to talk to these governors of these other planets. I need you to do whatever it takes to get this Imperial shipyard or we're going to go bankrupt. But what actually happens at this meeting is Rankling gets arrested because apparently he convinced one of the governors to withdraw their request for this shipyard by paying them off. And how Rankling actually was discovered to be bribing these other governors was because Price gave him this datapad that had a recording device on it, and so she had the whole recording of him bribing these governors, and so he was taken to prison and we never see him again, and so Price in the end gets her final revenge on Rankling for stealing her family's mine. But after that event, Thrawn and Eli have another conversation about the dunium that's being sent throughout the Empire. Apparently, all the dunium and the Wookiees were all being sent to this one little area that no one really knows about what's going on. There's no ships going in and out of this sector, and that's where Eli and Thrawn believes the Empire is constructing this big project. Time continues on, and in the Lothal sector and all of these other planets, they're noticing that there's these rebel groups starting to crop up. So in response, the Imperials are going to be sending a bunch of captains out, trying to stop the rebels before they continue growing. Thrawn is originally going to be sent to Bataan to stop these rebels that have taken over this Imperial base, but this other commander is like, that is my job because Thrawn is insignificant and not going to be able to do the job. Thrawn takes this as an insult, so he's like, hey, you can do this job. But in response, Thrawn is actually going to kind of hide on Bataan to see what is going to happen, while Thrawn has one of his other captains take the Chimera and deal with the assignment that he was given. So Eli and Thrawn are on Bataan, and they're watching from afar as this one commander is trying to take out these rebels that are stationed at this Imperial base. The Imperials are getting decimated, and Thrawn is just like, oh god, this guy's doing a bad job, and he is going to try and fix the issue by taking out the rebels after seeing how they attack. As the Imperials are attacking the rebel base, there is these small frigates being sent out. There's like 7 of them, and they're going to different areas on the map. They're going like to the north, there's one going to the south, there's one going to the east and the west. And Thrawn is just like, Eli, I want you to follow these ships so that we know exactly where they're going. And Thrawn assumes that these frigates are holding rebels along with all the supplies that are in this military base. As Eli and Thrawn are following these ships, they notice that one of them stops kind of like in the forest in the middle of nowhere, and they believe that this is where the rebels are hiding. Thrawn then tells Eli to dress up as this smuggler, and for some reason in the comic they have him wearing Thrawn's suit, but in the book he's dressed up as a smuggler and he pretends to be an arms dealer to these rebel pirates. The rebels then bring Eli before the rebel leader, who we find out is Sinji. And Sinji just reveals to Eli his entire plan, how he wanted to stop Thrawn's military career politically and actually fighting him in combat because he knew that Thrawn was going to be a major threat to him, especially since he outsmarted him with the Tabani gas issue. He knew that Thrawn would be one of the only Imperials that could actually take him down. Sinji then tells Eli that all of their efforts with the spice and all of the things with the moths and every single thing with the higher skies was actually his doing, and that he is going to end the Empire. As Eli and Sinji are talking to each other, there's this massive alarm that goes off in the base, and there's these gunfires and big explosions, and Thrawn swoops in, basically saves Eli, and they escape through one of the rebel frigates back to the Empire. In addition, Thrawn does return back to Bataan to take back that military base. One thing that's interesting though is on the frigate, they noticed that Creek Point was kind of one of the saved destinations, so they're assuming that is one of the rebel strongholds because Creek Point is this big mining. The Imperials then make this plan to take Creek Point, and actually Price is involved with this because her parents live in Creek Point, and she says, I can actually probably help us win this assault if the rebels are stationed there. I can pretend that I'm just visiting my parents because they won't know me that I'm an Imperial, and I'll be able to maybe sneak in and tell you where all of the defenses and the turrets and everything are located. So the Imperials are going to try and have Price sneak in as kind of this traveler, but she's going to have this guy named Agent Gondry with her that's going to protect her and help kind of mark the supplies of the rebels. Meanwhile, Thrawn and Yularen will be stationed outside of the city, and they're going to basically wait for Price and Gondry to get out, and then they're going to attack. Price and Gondry then meet up with her parents at her house, and they have this dinner and this whole meeting, and he's kind of pretending to be like her boyfriend type thing going on, and they're talking about how they want to go into the mine to find one of Gondry's friends who is apparently missing. Price's father agrees to go. He's like, I can kind of escort you through the mine and we can kind of look for your friend since I'm like one of the head guys at the mine. And so they go off to the mine to investigate to see if they can find Gondry's friend, when in reality they're actually just trying to mark up all of the supplies and find the shield generator for the city. Before Price leaves her house though, she takes her mother's comm and she is going to use it later. As they're going through the mine, they're trying to find Gondry's friend, but in reality he's just kind of like mentally noting like, oh, here is the supplies, here is the explosives, the shield generator is right here, it's had this, and this, and this. Meanwhile, this is going on and they're looking for Gondry's friend. Price runs away and she kind of sneaks behind this tractor and she opens up her mom's comm and she calls her dad on his comm, trying to pretend to be sick and that she needs his help right away. Price's father is like, listen, Gondry, you can still investigate the mine, but I gotta go help my wife. Price comes out and she's like, yeah, that's fine, I'll protect Gondry and we'll be back in an hour. Meanwhile, this is going on, they set explosives on all of the supplies and everything in the shield generator so that the Imperials can attack. After that's all done, Godry and Price then return back to her parents' house, and then Price says, we have to get my family out of here because I'm not going to have them die in an Imperial assault. Godry then pulls out a blaster and he's like, you're coming with me. We're leaving right now. If your parents die, your parents die, but we have to get out of here right now. And while this happens, she's able to take the blaster out of his hand and kill him. She then escapes with her parents back to the Imperial lines and she saves them from the assault. While this whole Price thing is going on, Thrawn contacts Nightswan and he sets up a private meeting with him. While they have this private meeting going on, Nightswan just basically tells Thrawn that, I am from a mining family, I've always mined, and I saw what the Imperials did to my mine and basically turned people into slaves, and everything that we worked for was destroyed because of the Empire, and this is what made me go down the path that I'm in right now. He first started with smuggling metals to try and help people get by, but then once he started doing this, it just kind of led from one thing to another until eventually he made this whole rebel cell. He then reveals to Thrawn that he knows that the Imperials are stealing this Dunium for a massive project. He doesn't know exactly what it is yet, but he knows it's a giant military project and the Imperials want to protect it at all costs, and if Thrawn had any information regarding it, they could work together to stop it. Nightswan then reveals to Thrawn that, he planted these people to try and collect information regarding senators and the military and everything, but he had no plans on actually murdering and assassinating people, and that guard that assassinated that senator actually was not his doing, and he kind of just went over the deep end. And so Nightswan tries to put on this cloak of, I just want to do what's best for the people and I don't actually want to hurt anyone except the Imperials that are trying to hurt everybody else. In addition, Nightswan reveals that Tarkin actually has a huge impact on this project, and he knows that there's something going on, but he's just missing one piece of information. He doesn't know where the project is actually being made. He has no idea. He knows everything else that, it has to do with these metals and Tarkin's involved, but he has no idea where in the galaxy it's actually occurring. And if you haven't figured it out already, this major project is the Death Star. Thrawn then reveals to Nightswan that he has kind of an idea of where this project is, and that maybe if they work together, they can reveal what this project is because it might affect the Chiss in some way. And this is where we first kind of get the biggest hint that, is Thrawn actually loyal to the Empire or is he loyal to the Chiss? I mean, this entire time he was trying to get military prestige, and when we first met him, he was like, I want to go back to my homeworld, I want to help my people, and then we kind of saw him just working for the Empire, and the entire time we're like, is he actually loyal to the Empire? We don't know. But this is the first time that we see that Thrawn's loyalties are kind of going back and forth. Is he loyal? We don't know. Thrawn then asks what does Nightswan want to do with the rebels, and Nightswan's just like, I never wanted to really start a rebel alliance, a rebel thing. I just kind of started it and it just kind of happened, but I'm not the one to lead them. Somebody else will lead them in the end. Nightswan then asks Thrawn, why are you with the Empire? They hate you, you're an alien, they hate aliens. And this is where Thrawn actually tells us the full truth of what actually happened and why he was at that camp to begin with. Apparently, the Chiss Ascendancy planted Thrawn in one of these outer planets because they knew the Empire was going to be a threat to the Chiss. They wanted to investigate what the Empire was about, so they planted him and made him look like he was living there for years, when in reality he was only there for a few weeks, and they wanted him to kind of infiltrate the Empire, gain some power and prestige, and try to discover everything about them as well as their weaknesses and their strengths. Thrawn even goes as far to say, the Empire is super corrupt and it won't last forever. Palpatine is going to die at some point, but he believes that if we can get some people in the Empire that are actually good, we might be able to turn this thing around after Palpatine dies. Thrawn then even asks Nightswan to join the Chiss Ascendancy. He's like, you show so much potential. You are such a good tactician. You actually kind of made me sweat a little bit in trying to figure out how to track you down. You could actually help us and we can stop the Empire together for whatever project they're trying to do. You could actually help us end the Empire. Nightswan refuses to join the Chiss Ascendancy and he's like, I guess I'll see you on the battlefield. Have a good one, Thrawn. See you later. While Thrawn is returning back to his ship, Yularen comes out of nowhere, out of these bushes, and he's like, I heard the entire conversation and you're a traitor to the Empire. I should turn you in and you should be in prison. Thrawn just kind of sidestepped the entire thing, and he's just like, no, I'm not a traitor, I'm going to help the Empire in the end. It was just an act. I'm not sure how he sidestepped this, but for somehow Yularen doesn't turn him in, and they continue the assault on Creek Path. So the Imperials assault Creek Path, and they're going to be going to Price's home because Price is back, but Agent Gondry is not back. So the Imperials are going to try and get him out of the city before they destroy the entire place. But before the Imperials actually get to her house, she actually explodes all of the charges that they set except for the shield generator charges. So there's this massive fire in the city and the shield generator is still up, and the shield generator basically just fumes the fire and the entire city pretty much gets leveled and there's tons of civilian casualties, and no one discovers that she was the one that actually murdered Agent Gaudry, and she is responsible for the destruction of Creek Path. So after the whole assault, the Imperials have this debriefing and they all believe that Price basically murdered everyone in the city because the explosion went off and they destroyed all of the guns and the explosives and everything, but they didn't get the shield generator and they think Price had some role in it. Price could have destroyed the shield generator, but she decided not to because she wanted to make sure that no one saw the evidence that she actually murdered Agent Gaudry, because she would lose all of her power if they saw that she murdered him. So everyone's very suspicious of her. They think she murdered Gaudry and set up the entire scheme of destroying all of Creek Path, but there's no evidence to prove that she did it since the whole city was pretty much leveled. After the whole debriefing, Price then talks with Thrawn, and they talk about how in Lothal there's more rebel resurgent groups going on and how she wants to have Thrawn aid her, and this really sets Rebels up because we see Thrawn in Rebels, so I'm guessing like maybe this happens during Rebels in some regard. I haven't seen the show in a while, but maybe this is how Thrawn gets sent over to Lothal. Thrawn then meets up with Palpatine back on Coruscant, and Palpatine now promotes Thrawn to Grand Admiral. So Grand Admiral Thrawn is now in charge of the Imperial fleet pretty much. And one interesting thing is Thrawn brings up to the Emperor that he knows about the Death Star project, and Palpatine's just like, how did you figure that out? Nobody knows about that except for like me and Tarkin and a few other people, He's very, very angry that he figured this out, and Thrawn suggests, we shouldn't have this giant Death Star thing. We should actually work on TIE Defenders, because TIE Defenders will be better in combat when we can have 1,000,000 TIE Defenders versus just one giant starship. Palpatine is just like, no, we're just going to continue the Death Star project, because if we have a giant planet-destroying ship, everyone will fear the Empire, and we will not have to fight anymore. And Thrawn then asks if Palpatine's going to use this against the Chiss, and Palpatine just says no. And then after this little exchange, Vader walks in, then we have Vader exchanging greetings with Thrawn, and then Vader walks in after he gets promoted and have their little exchange about the Death Star, and then Darth Vader and Thrawn exchange greetings, and then the book ends. Finally, in the epilogue, we see Eli. He's all by himself in the Outer Rim on this ship, and he has the Journal of Thrawn, and he's going through the journal of all of their adventures and everything he's learned from Thrawn about being a tactician, and he's kind of like, I always wanted to be a shipping manager, but I think this was my calling. This was my destiny, was to work with Thrawn. And Eli meets up with this giant Chiss ship with Admiral Arihnda, and he's going to help the Chiss Ascendancy. So that is it for the Thrawn novel. I'll be doing this whole summary review thing of the other Thrawn novels, so you don't actually have to read the entire book, but I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a thumbs up and a comment of what you liked about the novel, or if you'd like to see another novel, please let me know what you would like to see next. But anyways, guys, I will see you in the next one. Stay frosty.